Can an armed populace win against a government? One common argument used by gun control advocates is that private gun ownership is obsolete in the role of deterring tyrannical governments. They point to the modern military with drones, armored vehicles, advanced aircraft and precision munitions and suggest that in the face of such advanced weaponry there is nothing any number of citizens armed with small arms could do to combat them. Such an opinion is based on a poor understanding of military tactics and wholesale acceptance of the image of the modern military portrayed in the media, and happily encouraged by the powers that be, although they themselves know that it is not true. It is true that it would be unlikely for armed citizens to ever again form Napoleonic-style armies, centralizing their manpower and directly fighting government armies in pitched battles, as was possible in the Revolutionary War period. Outgunned resistance groups have used guerrilla warfare tactics in order to counter the strengths of modern militaries, hitting their enemies in the time and place of their choosing, while scattering amongst the populace when combat would be unfavorable. As we saw in Iraq, the majority of the fighting, and Western combat losses came not from the initial organized defense, but from the armed insurgency of the populace. However, the example of Iraq often draws the criticism that despite the appearance of ISIS that now controls large parts of Iraq, while America and their allies maintain the will to fight, Iraqi insurgents could not push the Western forces out of Iraq purely through force of arms. This is because there is another key difference between the sort of guerrilla warfare we saw in Iraq, Vietnam and past conflicts and the sort we would expect in a domestic civil war. In all conflicts post-World War II in which America has participated, the area of operations was far removed from the war industries that supplied the fighting forces, and the supply lines that connected the area of operations were well secured. Any attempt to significantly hinder the flow of supplies from the western homelands to the area of operations was impossible for the enemies being fought. The Western modern militaries fought all modern conflicts at the end of these unchallenged supply lines, which brought forth effectively unlimited amounts of fuel, reinforcements, supplies, and munitions to the Western fighting forces. In any sort of major civil conflict, such a clear unchallenged supply line would be at best, unlikely. Sun Tzu's art of war suggests what one would think is the obvious, to strike where one's enemy is weak. For decades we have only seen the great strength of the modern Western military, the tip of the spear always pointed at a distant enemy. In any sort of major civil disturbance the whole body of the modern military war machine would be laid bare to the admittedly less well-armed insurgency. There would be no need to fight the enemy where they are strong, they would strike the government military where they are weak. Modern militaries are greatly dependent on continuous supplies of fuel and ammunition in order to at all be effective. A tank or aircraft without fuel or ammunition is useless as a fighting force. This vulnerability means an insurgency only needs to target soft targets like refineries, pipelines, war industries and transportation routes for supplies. While initial sorties from government-loyal military forces would likely be devastating to any targeted by them, the government would lack a clearly defined military structure to attack, much like the scenario America found itself in during the Second Iraq War. The whole of the armed forces lacks the manpower to secure all soft targets from potential attack, and supplies for their fighting forces would soon dwindle as the vulnerable supply lines were cut by the insurgency. The military bases themselves where forces are stationed are likewise, not impenetrable fortresses designed to withstand attack. The vast majority are protected by little more than chain-link fences, or warning signs, both of which would prove inadequate to stop dedicated assaults from small arms-wielding insurgents. An example of this would be the 2012 Camp Bastion raid in Afghanistan in which 19 insurgents infiltrated an air base destroying or heavily damaging 9 Harrier jet aircraft before being killed. This single attack by small group destroyed 6% of the entire Marine Corps supply of Harrier fighter jets. This attack took place in what was known to be an active war zone and despite the fact 100 Marines had been assigned to defend the perimeter. It stands to reason, in a scenario of major insurrection, most domestic military installations would be even less able to withstand attacks from similar groups with small arms. Two other major factors contribute to the odds supporting the success of any potential American insurgency. One is that any action taken by the government likely to enrage the American population to incite them to armed rebellion, would also likely divide the military when orders came to put down the rebellion. Some troops would be unwilling to fight against their own people, while others might go further, attempting to seize military equipment and installations in the name of the rebellion. In any case, a scenario where the military presence and entirely united front against an armed rebellion of the American populace is highly unlikely, further degrading the military's ability to attack insurgents and defend vital military infrastructure. The final factor is foreign interventions. Faced with the reality of a major armed rebellion in the United States, various foreign powers would have to decide how they would react to the conflict. Direct military intervention would be unlikely, given that America's Navy and foreign military bases are ironically in much stronger strategic scenarios than any forces that are based domestically. In the early days of a conflict, foreign nations would likely still risk nuclear retaliation from U.S. naval assets if they were to attempt any direct military intervention in the continental United States. A far more likely outcome would be covert supplying of the insurgency against the government forces. Some may even take diplomatic efforts to recognize a new United States, or the independence of any breakaway states. The American empire has made many enemies over the decades around the world, and the foreign powers would very likely not care about the minutiae of the politics of the insurgency itself, only that supporting the insurgency would, win or lose, significantly hamper the efforts of their longtime rival. Covert supplies and diplomatic assistance would flow to the rebellion, simply as a matter of getting even. However, an armed core of resistance would have to exist in order to receive this assistance, in the form of the armed citizenry. This scenario as presented should not be in any way construed as a call to arms, only a counter to the claim that an armed citizenry is useless against a modern military force. If you enjoyed this information, please like this video and subscribe. Thank you.